Hashtag how to quiet your mind and find inner peace. Hashtag sleep wave. Original script. Hook. The average human mind generates over 6,000 thoughts per day, and research from Harvard University found that people spend nearly 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they are actually doing. Nearly half your life, lost in mental noise. And here is the part that will stop you cold. That constant mental wandering is not just exhausting. Scientists have directly linked it to lower happiness scores than almost any other single factor they measured. Your busy mind is not protecting you. It is costing you everything. Tease. In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover exactly why the mind refuses to go quiet, what ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience agree on, and the single most counterintuitive truth about inner peace that almost nobody is willing to say out loud. We will walk through the history, the science, and the practical path forward. And we will arrive at one insight that completely flips the way most people think about calming their minds. Stay with this. What you hear next might genuinely change how you experience every single day. Background. Human beings have been searching for mental quiet for thousands of years. The earliest recorded meditation practices date back to approximately 1500 BCE in ancient India, described in texts called the Vedas. Buddhist traditions formalized techniques for stilling the mind around 500 BCE, and similar practices emerged independently in Taoist China, Stoic Greece, and among the desert monks of early Christianity. Every major civilization, on every continent, arrived at the same conclusion: the human mind left unchecked becomes its own worst enemy. For most of human history, philosophers and spiritual teachers held the answers to mental peace. Then something shifted. In the 20th century, psychologists and neuroscientists began studying the mind with precision tools: brain scans, stress hormone measurements, randomized controlled trials. And what they found was remarkable. The ancient teachers were not wrong. They were simply describing, in the language available to them, the same neurological mechanisms that modern science would later measure in laboratories. But here is what nobody talks about. Despite thousands of years of available wisdom, and despite decades of cutting-edge research, the modern mental health crisis is getting worse, not better. Anxiety disorders now affect over 280 million people worldwide according to the World Health Organization. The tools exist. The knowledge exists. So why are so many minds still in chaos? Main content. The answer begins with understanding what your mind is actually doing when it will not go quiet. Your brain has a network called the default mode network, often abbreviated as DMN. This is the system that activates when you are not focused on a specific task. It is responsible for daydreaming, self-referential thinking, rumination, and what neuroscientists call mental time travel, replaying the past or rehearsing the future. The default mode network is not a flaw. It evolved to help you plan, solve problems, and understand other people. But in the modern world, it runs almost constantly, and it has developed a strong bias toward negative content. Neuroscientists call this negativity bias. Your brain is roughly 3 times more sensitive to threatening or negative information than to positive information. This was adaptive on the savannah 200,000 years ago, when missing a threat meant death. Today, it means your mind fixates on the embarrassing thing you said 5 years ago, the bill you forgot to pay, and the worst possible interpretation of an ambiguous text message. Rhetorical question worth sitting with: what if quieting your mind does not mean stopping these thoughts? What if it means changing your relationship to them entirely? That is precisely what mindfulness-based research has been demonstrating since the 1970s, when Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn developed mindfulness-based stress reduction at the University of Massachusetts. His program produced measurable reductions in anxiety, depression, and chronic pain. Subsequent research from Oxford, Stanford, and Johns Hopkins has replicated those findings hundreds of times. A landmark meta-analysis published in JAMA Internal Medicine reviewed 47 separate clinical trials and concluded that mindfulness meditation programs show moderate evidence of improving anxiety, depression, and pain, with no harmful side effects. The mechanism is not mystical. When you practice observing your thoughts without immediately reacting to them, you are literally strengthening the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for regulation and perspective, and weakening the automatic grip of the amygdala, your brain's threat detection center. You are rewiring the hardware. Deep dive. But mindfulness is only one path into stillness, and it is not the right entry point for everyone. Research on different temperaments suggests that some people find more relief through somatic practices, working with the body first. This makes neurological sense. The vagus nerve, which runs from your brainstem down through your heart, lungs, and digestive system, carries information in both directions. Roughly 80% of the signals traveling along the vagus nerve move upward, from body to brain. This means your physical state has an enormous influence on your mental state, often faster than conscious thought can intervene. Slow, diaphragmatic breathing directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state that counterbalances the fight or flight response. A study published in the journal Psychophysiology found that extending your exhale to be longer than your inhale shifts your heart rate variability in ways that signal safety to the brain within minutes. This is why every contemplative tradition on earth, from Zen Buddhism to Sufi mysticism to Ignatian Christian prayer, incorporates some form of breath awareness. They discovered the mechanism empirically, centuries before anyone had the instruments to measure it. Here is something even more fascinating. A 2016 study from the Stanford Social Neuroscience Laboratory found that nature exposure, specifically walking in natural environments for 90 minutes, reduced activity in the subgenual prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain most associated with repetitive negative thinking, or rumination. Participants who walked in nature showed measurable decreases in brooding compared to those who walked in urban environments. Your mind quiets more easily when your nervous system feels genuinely safe. And for 200,000 years, safety meant being surrounded by trees, open skies, and the sound of moving water. But here is what nobody talks about. Most people approach mental quietude as a problem to be solved through willpower. They sit down, attempt to force their mind silent, fail within 30 seconds, and conclude that they are simply bad at this. That interpretation is not just incorrect, it is the single biggest obstacle to actually finding peace. Analysis. Every neuroscientist and contemplative teacher worth listening to agrees on this point. The goal is never to have no thoughts. The goal is to stop being dragged around by them. This distinction sounds subtle. It is not. It is everything. When you try to suppress a thought, you activate what psychologist Daniel Wegner famously called the ironic process theory. The very act of telling yourself not to think about something requires a monitoring process that keeps the forbidden thought active. Suppression backfires. Observation succeeds. This is why the instruction in meditation is always to notice thoughts, acknowledge them, and gently return attention, not to eliminate them entirely. Think of your mind like a snow globe. When it is shaken constantly, by stress, overstimulation, and the relentless scroll of digital information, the snow is everywhere and you cannot see clearly. Inner peace is not the absence of snow. It is simply stopping the shaking long enough for everything to settle. The thoughts are still there. They just stop dominating your entire field of vision. The practical implications of this understanding are significant. It means that 5 minutes of genuine non-reactive awareness is worth more than an hour of frustrated thought suppression. It means that inner peace is not a permanent state you achieve and then possess forever, it is a skill you practice, and deepen, and return to. It means that every single person, regardless of history, temperament, or current circumstances, has the neurological capacity to find stillness. The research is unambiguous on that point. Conclusion: the mind generates noise because it evolved to